Good day or good evening, everybody. My name is Ermias Kabrab. I'm the Director of World Food Center, Associate Dean of Global Engagement, and a Professor of Animal Science at the University of California, Davis. Today, we are presenting the third in a series of independent dialogues as a precursor to the United Nations Food Systems Summit in September of this year. And today's dialogue targets track 5, which focuses on building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stress. And today's dialogue is entitled Innovations for Promoting Resilience and Empowering Rural Families to Invest in Agricultural Transformation. And thank you to our facilitator, panelists, and other invited experts for being with us. And thank you also to those of you watching the recording of this dialogue. The format of today's event is as follows. The facilitator will give an overview of the topic, then introduce the panelists. Each panelist will give a brief presentation. After the presentations, there will be a moderated dialogue amongst all participants and panelists. We're looking for expert dialogue around 6 areas. First is to provide a sectoral context for the particular innovations under examination, why these innovations are important, what other themes or innovations in this action track are also important. Second, to encourage discussion of potential gaps in the science and evidence base that warrant continuing research. Third is to encourage discussion of the potential for these innovations to deliver food system solutions, whether they might even be considered game changers. Fourth, identify potential areas of divergence or debate among the experts and participants. Fifth is to memorialize common perspectives and themes. And finally, foster expert consensus on next steps and new directions. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. The invited guest microphones are muted for now. We will unmute you after the presentations end. And please turn off your video for the first part of the event. And please hold your questions until the discussion period and use the raise hand feature in your toolbar to be addressed. And if you have issues, send a chat to the host and you will get targeted help. The video recording will be available in a few weeks on the World Food Center website. Now, I'd like to introduce the facilitator of today's dialogue, Michael Carter. He is Distinguished Professor of Agricultural and Resource Economics at the University of California, Davis, and Honorary Professor of Economics, University of Cape Town. He directs the USAID Basis Markets Risk and Resilience Innovation Lab. His current research projects examine poverty dynamics and productive social safety nets, evaluation of interventions to boost small farm uptake of improved technologies, and feature a suite of projects that design, pilot, and evaluate index insurance contracts as mechanisms to alleviate chronic poverty and deepen agriculture and rural finance markets. Thank you for agreeing to facilitate the discussion today, and I will pass it on to you and leave it in your capable hands.
Thank you very much, Ermias, and I really want to thank the panelists and invited experts who have joined us for this adventure. So without further ado, let me get going here with my screen. So this session is about innovations to promote resilience and empower families to invest in agricultural transformation. So let me just jump right in and I'll introduce our panelists here in just a moment. So first of all, let me just say a little bit about resilience and how we might think about it. So this simple diagram here, this is just a made up diagram, but I think it helps focus the mind on what we're thinking about. So the horizontal axis here, we can think about this as marching through time, different agricultural cycles or years. And the top blue line here sort of represents where a family would be going in terms of their level of well-being, maybe their income, maybe their consumption level, without a shock. When a shock happens and hits a family, then it knocks them down. And if we use the definition of resilience as the ability to manage adversity without compromising current and future well-being, then the gap between where the family would have been without the shock and where they are with the shock is sort of a natural measure of resilience. So what I've labeled here is the resilience gap. So the family that falls down hard, they have a compromise of current well-being, and if the shock has a long tail, which we often see that it does, and Poswell later is going to be giving us a concrete example of this kind of analysis, we see that the cost of a lack of resilience economically to the family is really important. At the Markets Risk and Resilience Innovation Lab, we're actually working on statistical methods to measure resilience using this sort of conceptually based approach. So resilience is important, but almost more important is what we in the lab have started to call resilience plus. So as defined here, resilience plus occurs when risk management tool make farm families resilient. And when they're resilient, they're able to prudentially invest more and improve their future level of well-being over what it would have been without the risk management tools. So again, the same diagram, without resilience tools, a family would sort of come along. Without a shock, they'd be chugging along here. But a family that has good risk management tools, the hypothesis of the resilience plus gain is that once they become confident that they have those tools, they actually begin to invest more, and they're on a transformative trajectory because of those additional levels of investment. So sometimes we call this the ex-ante benefits of risk management tools, or the ability of risk management tools to crowd in additional investment for people that feel confident that they're going to be able to survive a shock and don't have to worry about losing everything in the event that a climate or other sort of shock does occur. So again, some of the work we've been doing is then trying to measure not only the resilience gap, but very importantly, the resilience gain. So we have accumulating evidence on both resilience and resilience plus. So there's very old literature within economics that risk makes and keeps people poor. I remember actually when I first started to work in development economics, which seems like a long time ago now, there was an emerging literature on the Green Revolution and the so-called yield gap. And there were some studies that decomposed the yield gap into different causes, and the yield gap being the difference between what farmers are able to generate on their own fields versus what is technologically possible. And a portion of that yield gap was typically attributed to risk, that people would not be willing to make profit maximizing levels of investment because it put too much of their capital at risk, and they needed that capital or that savings as a buffer to help them out, help the family out in the event there was actually a crop failure. Chris Barrett, who's with us today, recently, along with Jean-Paul Chavaz and myself, we wrote a book called Economics of Poverty Traps, which is very much about how risk as an item, risk as a factor in rural areas, not only risk can make people poor, but sort of keeps them poor over a longer period of time. So we have this kind of evidence that's been around and accumulating really for quite a number of decades. The interesting question is the converse to this proposition that risk makes and keeps people poor. Is it true? That is, will the provision of risk management tools allow people to escape poverty? So in the specific area of index insurance, which is something we're going to be talking about, there's a handful, maybe 10 or so studies when I last counted them out, that when farmers have index insurance contracts, they actually respond. They're so confident that they can be resilient to a shock, they exhibit resilient plus. That is, they actually boost their investment. And the levels of the increase in those investments are non-trivial amounts of money. So there's a study by Dean Carlin and a number of colleagues in Ghana. I did a study with Hada Elabed in Mali, and just to pick on those two studies, they both identify something in the neighborhood of 20 to 30% increase in investment that farmers are undertaking when they have risk management tools. And that's an astounding number. I've had my undergraduate students actually calculate rates of return on these, and they're gigantic, because implicitly families have been leaving 20 to 30% of their potential income on the table because they can't manage the risk of making those investments. So if you can liberate families and put them in a position where they can do that, that's going to be really, really, really important. So a bit later today, Chris Barrett's going to be sharing with us a little bit more on index insurance, focusing specifically on livestock insurance in the regions of East Africa. Equally important, though, we want to keep in mind that index insurance is in many ways an early stage technology. It can be failure prone, and it's in need of quality measurement and improvement. And Lillian Ndungu from the Regional Center for Mapping Resources for Development, it's a remote sensing laboratory in Nairobi, is working on quality standards and quality certification for index insurance. And she'll give us a little more on that. So we're trying to give you both the good news and the evidence on index insurance, but also keep us mindful that there's still a lot to be done to make that insurance sufficiently reliable that it can fulfill its promise to help people. We also have equally promising evidence that stress-tolerant seed varieties can help people. And we have with us today Kyle Emmerich from Tufts University, who did a really fascinating study a couple of years back on flood-tolerant rice. And it really illustrated very much the same thing we see with the insurance studies. That is, when you have a technology, in this case, flood-tolerant rice, that gives farmers confidence that they'll be able to survive a shock, then they respond in kind by actually intensifying investment levels. So Kyle has kindly agreed to join us, and I'm sure we can hear more from him a bit later on. We're going to have Paswal Morenya from the International Center for the Improvement of Maize and Wheat, or CIMMYT. He's going to be presenting some results on drought-tolerant maize and its impact on resilience and Resilience Plus. The specific project Paswal will present to us is work done in Tanzania and Mozambique. And it looks at drought-tolerant maize varieties on their own, but also in combination with a complementary index insurance packages. Excuse me. Finally, another approach to all of this is trying to use digital tools to create and disseminate local level weather forecasts, in the hopes that this will allow farmers to feel more confident that putting down fertilizer, if they know it's not going to be washed away because the weather looks adequate or the moisture looks okay, but not too much. And a lot of questions about whether this can really work or not. And from the Tegemeo Institute in Nairobi, Mercy, I hope she is now with us, will be joining us to talk about some new work she's launching, examining the efficacy of this technology. And what we need to learn still about whether using these digital tools, both to predict weather information, but also to disseminate it, can actually put farmers in a position where they will intensify their investment and improve their level of well-being. So the agenda for today, I've already mostly introduced it, but we're going to draw most of the work we're going to talk about has a root in the USAID sponsored Markets Risk and Resilience Innovation Lab. So we're presenting a mix of what we've learned and in a sense what we still need to learn about tools that will allow smallholder farmers to participate in agricultural growth and transformation. So we'll go in three sections here. Chris and Lillian will talk about index insurance. Then Paswal is going to talk to us about stress-tolerant seeds. And then finally, Mercy Kamu will talk to us about weather informations and forecasts. So that's our agenda for today. So after each speaker speaks for about 10 minutes. And I'll mention Chris Barrett is going to come at the end after we've looked at this suite of things and talk a bit about the importance of bundling different kinds of innovations. So in a sense, trying to draw this all together. And then after Chris makes that second short presentation, we'll jump into the discussion period with all of you, and we look forward to that conversation. So I will stop sharing my screen, and without further ado, let's pass it over to Chris.
Thanks so much for inviting my participation. These issues are very near and dear to my heart and research program, and I'm very grateful to the USAID Markets Risk and Resilience Innovation Lab and its predecessors that have supported a good chunk of the work that I'll describe right now, trying to draw on 11 years plus of IBLI, of index-based livestock insurance. What can we learn from this that's relevant to these questions for the the UN Food Systems Summit. So first, let me start by explaining why IBLI was created. IBLI built on a base of research, much of it also supported by USAID, on risk management in the drylands of East Africa, particularly in northern Kenya and southern Ethiopia, where a range of different data sets, different methods, consistently corroborated the hypothesis that poverty traps really do exist in this setting, meaning that people who fall into poverty wind up having behavioral changes that induce them to stay in poverty, so that it becomes very difficult once thrust into a low level of productive asset holdings and income earning to escape from that without some sort of intervention, natural, policy, market, whatever it might be. Moreover, that when one unpacks the mechanisms behind poverty traps in that particular setting, that the real driver was catastrophic herd loss due to major droughts. So pastoralist populations in these regions depend overwhelmingly on livestock for their livelihoods. When droughts come and kill 30, 40, 50 or more % of their herd during an event, and their neighbors are likewise suffering, it casts them into a completely different equilibrium, and it puts great stress on the system. So this puts a premium on drought risk management. It means that figuring out ways to remove some of the drought risk from the system can be good for individuals, helping them to avoid falling into and staying in poverty, and for society more broadly. It can relieve the need for humanitarian relief payments. It can relieve pressures on social solidarity networks that become frayed. A range of studies, several of them cited here, keep documenting these core takeaway messages. Moreover, with climate change and the increased prospect of severe droughts, so it appears that the frequency and intensity of droughts are increasing in this region, not uniformly, then this remains an area of active research. But if it is true that drought frequency is increasing, then simulation work based off of the estimated herd dynamics one finds from these data sets suggests that the entire system could collapse, and there would no longer be any high-level equilibria where you have economically viable migratory transhuman herds. So all of that background research, empirical research and theory work behind it pointed to the need for innovations for pastoralists to be able to avoid and escape poverty traps, to maintain high levels of agricultural productivity rooted in livestock husbandry, and needing to get beyond the usual responses of slow and relatively meager food aid, of post-drought restocking programs, et cetera. So that was the background. So the innovation index-based livestock insurance was a partnership. Michael was very much involved in the start of this, as were a range of partners from especially ILRI, the International Livestock Research Institute, several of us academics from around the world, and commercial insurers and reinsurers were there from the beginning in the product design and pricing and agreeing on a range of different characteristics of products, as were several local and global non-governmental organizations who helped to support the rollout and extension efforts around IBLI. And over time, local and national governments going from being just supportive of there being IBLI on offer to, as I'll explain in a few minutes, the Kenyan government has embraced IBLI and embedded it within the nationwide Kenya livestock insurance program. So IBLI is, as the name suggests, an index-based product. It's not insurance of actual losses by individual policyholders. Rather, it's insurance against a common state. So as the simple little graphic that's used in extension programming that's on the lower left here signals, the index is around the state of forage as reflected from satellite-based measures, remotely sensed measures of the normalized difference vegetation index. So spectral readings of the surface of the earth tell us how much green matter there is. We've found in statistical studies that is strongly but imperfectly predictive of herd loss. Because there's a long enough satellite time series, one can generate an insurable contract based off of the statistical properties of those NDVI time series. So when there's ample grass available and animals are typically healthy as a result, there is no payment. While when the grass disappears under typical drought conditions and animals grow much more wasted, then we start to see payouts. The details of this are embedded in papers cited here, but the key things to understand are it's based off of a publicly available, near real-time, non-manipulable, remotely sensed signal. There's no requirement to go check for dead animals. There are no claims being made independently by policyholders. Rather, the signal that generates the index is monitored and payments are pushed out by the insurer and the reinsurer. There are 2 candidate payment periods because this is a bimodal rainfall zone. Sales are made using simple handheld point of sale devices, generating a receipt, much like the one you see in the center graphic here. And the state of the index is communicated to people through simple maps like the one you see in the lower right, where good conditions are depicted in green, orange conditions depict that there are worse conditions than normal, but not close to triggering payouts. Red are in the neighborhood of triggering payouts, and black means that if the index closed today, there would be payouts. So it's relatively cleanly communicated to people. So this innovation launched in January 2010 in a pilot that we ran in what's now Marsabit County in northern Kenya, depicted in blue in the map in the upper right. And not long thereafter, in August 2012, we adapted the product with a different commercial insurer, reinsurer partner set in southern Ethiopia, in the contiguous area of southern Ethiopia and Borana. So those 2 pilots were launched in 2010 and 2012, respectively, with rigorous monitoring and impact evaluation underpinning them. There were inducements provided, randomized inducements provided to encourage uptake. So we got somewhat inflated uptake because of those inducements. But over just the first 4 sales periods, we got roughly half of all sample participants purchased IBLI during that time. There are a range of kind of usual suspects that explain uptake, but the key takeaway is there's clearly demand for this product. Some of it subsidized, but in almost all cases, people had to pay money to buy the insurance. So there's clearly latent demand for this sort of insurance of the most valuable assets that households hold. The coverage, however, is partial. Michael emphasized this. These are really first generation products and they're imperfect. IBLI does not remove all the risks of livestock mortality in this system. It removes 1/4 to 40% of the risk, varies a bit across places, but because of idiosyncratic risk, things that happen to individual households and not to their neighbors, and because of design risk, the fact that we only design a contract off a short series of observations, and that's not going to exactly fit what really happens after that, there's always risk exposure remaining, and it can be a fair amount. You see that in the lower graphic. The key takeaway is, despite the imperfections of the product, it's had big positive impacts. We can rigorously estimate increased milk income per animal, in other words, increased productivity for the livestock these folks hold, consistent with Michael's discussion of Resilience Plus. We see improved child health status reflected in mid-upper arm circumference, a key indicator of the risk of premature mortality and long-term stunting. We see increases in household income, increases in household subjective well-being measures. We see increased informal transfers within the community. So this helps to firm up the local social solidarity network. Indeed, the marginal income or marginal nutritional impacts of public dollars spent on IBLI were 6 to 45 times that of a parallel cash transfer program introduced into the same region of northern Kenya at the same period. So depending upon exactly what estimator and indicator you want to use, you get any of a range of different marginal benefit ratios. But the key here is IBLI is much more impactful dollar per dollar at the margin than the cash transfers were. And we see nice evidence of reduced bad things happening: distressed livestock sales, herd losses, slaughtering of animals prematurely in response to their wasting, meal skipping by people in response to indemnity payments. So we see clear evidence that IBLI is having favorable impacts, even though it is an imperfect product. And this has helped to scale it. The evidence helped to make the case to first a Sharia compliant Takful insurance agency that provides Sharia compliant products to Muslim populations in northeastern Kenya and expanding into neighboring countries. You see in the upper left graphic the rollout over space and time from beginning just before the first IBLI pilot ran until most recently, where colors are getting darker and redder as there's more take-up. You can see the considerable scaling of this product over time, and indeed now it's scaled beyond our original study regions. WFP is offering a variant of IBLI in northern Ethiopia, and in Zambia is readying a launch of a pilot in Sudan, and is in the preparatory phase in Somalia, and a little bit further behind on preparatory phases in several Sahelian countries and other places in East Africa. So just to close, a few key innovation lessons here. This has been a highly impactful and scaled innovation, despite the fact that it's imperfect. No magic bullets exist, and it has real limitations. But the keys here have been it started from solid empirical and theoretical research. It wasn't just somebody's hunch with a blank sheet of paper. It was based off of a solid foundation of local research done by international and local partners across disciplines over a number of years. Secondly, a diverse range of institutional partnerships from the beginning: commercial partners, nonprofit partners, research partners, government partners. This really was crucial because at one step or another along the way, virtually every partner stumbled at some point. And if we were relying upon just one party to get this done, I suspect we would have seen IBLI collapse at some point before it really got off the ground and began to scale. So the diverse institutional partnerships helped to prevent errors and helped to sustain momentum once we got it started. Third, rigorous monitoring and evaluation really was crucial to assessment and building support. It's hard to overstate how much easier it was to convince people that there was something to this worth exploring by being able to give them hard estimates of different sorts of outcome results based off of rigorous designs. Fourth, you really needed highly engaged operational champions. So Takaful Insurance Agency for several years was a really vigorous champion of IBLI as one piece of a toolkit to help address the real challenges facing their target clientele. Andrew Mude at ILRI, who is really the heart and soul behind IBLI for a number of years, he and his team would jump in to help troubleshoot everything from research to getting vehicles out to have insurance salespeople get to communities. So you need engaged operational champions to help to troubleshoot when inevitably you face some challenges. And finally, and I'll come back to this point at the end of all of our presentations, bundling really has proved important here. And we haven't yet figured out all of this. This is a very active area of research right now. Financial innovation of this sort requires educating people. Most of the target clientele don't have experience of insurance. They don't even have experience with lending and savings products commonly. So it requires both ethically and operationally some educational or extension programming. It is commonly synergistic with social protection measures, in part because insurance itself can be a form of social protection. Michael and I have written with others about productive safety nets coming through insurance for those who are just above falling into the poverty trap to help give them the assurance that they won't. Needing, and we've been using improved remote sensing and operational technologies, everything from better point of sale devices on the retail end to better data streams on the design and evaluation end. These advances get bundled with products. And they really go hand in hand. And there are other innovations that we're looking at right now regarding women's programming to help facilitate women's empowerment through these sorts of products, conflict resolution, range management, et cetera. But the big part of the frontier for these sorts of innovative products is going to be identifying their complementary products, whether it's better technologies or other policies that can help them to achieve the sorts of positive impacts that we're already seeing, but we sense we could get still more positive results from these and other innovations. I'll be happy to discuss more later. There's a lot more information, and all of the studies I was referencing are available at the Dryland Innovations website. Thanks so much.
That was fantastic. Thank you. And you also really set up Lillian very nicely. So Lillian, let's pass over to you. So Lillian Ndungu runs works on the insurance part of the Regional Center for Mapping Resources for Development. RCMRD is a member of a network affiliated with NASA called the Severe Network. And Lillian and I began working together just a couple of years on the issue of, which she'll describe, called QUIC, for index insurance certification. So Lillian, thank you very much for joining us from Addis. I understand you're visiting your sister there. So anyway, take it away, Lillian.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. I'm actually here for work, and fortunately, my sister is also here. So it's a very wonderful coincidence. So I'm joining you from Addis, but I work from Nairobi at the Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development. And RCMRD is an intergovernmental organization based in Nairobi, whose goal is to strengthen the capacity of its member states, the ones that you can see in green, over 21 countries, to use geoinformation to improve the way that decisions are being made. So adding the geoinformation aspect and geotechnologies in decision making, so that we are pushing for more of data-driven decision making. And we started working with Michael in 2018 through the implementation of the Quality Index Insurance Certification project. But that was not our first entry point into agricultural insurance. We had already been supporting the Ministry of Agriculture in Kenya, and we still do, in implementing their crop insurance. But at the time, being a remote sensing organization, our focus is to look at how best the remote sensing or the other observation data and products and tools can improve the efficiency, reduce the cost in implementation, and even make work easier when implementing some of these projects. And so that was our first entry point to insurance. And so when Michael came on board and QUIC team came on board, it was a very fortuitous time, because our focus had been on the remote sensing side, but you cannot really address the issues in insurance without looking at the economic side. And so it was a great convergence of minds and ideas as we have figured out the implementation of QUIC. And what I like about it, if you can see from my screen, is that when you think about the implementation of an insurance contract, the idea of insurance is being sold to the farmer who does not understand the background or the information that is driving the definition of that insurance contract. And so you have a gap between the government and the farmers understanding whether this insurance is really going to be of value in bad years. And already you're talking about, or you're looking at farmers who are already constrained, already facing a very tricky situation of adapting and surviving through a climate that is changing, dependence on rain-fed resources, rain-fed agriculture, rain-fed pastures. And you find that most of their livelihoods are already constrained. There's maybe dependence on only one source of livelihood, which is again dependent on the climate variability. And so you're looking at communities of people who are already constrained in terms of their livelihoods. And so introducing an insurance product is a sensitive issue, because as Michael says, the worst can happen. If the insurance product is not designed well, then you're looking at two levels of losses. The farmer loses twice. They invest their scarce resources in an insurance program that does not protect them in the bad years. And so QUIC is based on the minimum quality standard that evaluates the value of the insurance to the farmer, to the government in bad years. And I like to say that these benefits do not only go to the farmer, as much as my focus is on the farmers, because a bad insurance contract actually causes losses to everyone. From the insurance company, they make basis losses. There are so many losses that occur. The government invests in a product or subsidizes a product that is not really benefit to the farmers. The farmer pays for a product that does not cushion them in bad years, but that gives them some kind of confidence to maybe do more, because when you have insurance, you take bigger risks. And so it is a very innovative idea, and you're looking at making sure that the farmers have a mark of quality. They know, and the government knows that if we invest in this product, it is going to serve our farmers in the bad years. And so Quick is again based on the concept of a minimum quality standard that evaluates the value of this insurance by checking how often it triggers in a bad year. Is it able to initiate or trigger a payout in a bad year? And so what we have been doing in the last few years is testing out these ideas and implementing them on actual insurance contracts. We've looked at the livestock insurance contracts in Kenya and Tanzania, and this year we are working on an insurance contract in Uganda, evaluating on its value to all the stakeholders involved. And basically, what Quick does is to tell the farmer or the government that, you know, you're better off taking this insurance product because it's going to give you some kind of cover in a bad year, or that you're better off without this insurance cover. In short, we are looking at whether the insurance provides a stabilizing effect in the income of the farmers between the good and the bad years. And so it also answers the question of whether, depending on the farmers' risk aversion, and this again depends on their wealth and well-being, how sensitive are they if they lose, for example, if they lose their livestock in a bad year, if they lose their harvest in a bad year, what does this mean? And maybe to give a little bit of context, it's actually sometimes the difference between a family taking a meal that day or not. And so you're talking about a very sensitive situation. And what we have seen in the last 10 years is that with the increasing availability of insurance products, we are seeing, with the increasing availability of other observation data, medium resolution, free data that is available at a higher frequency, spatially and in terms of time, we are seeing that insurance products are adopting other observation data. And the question is, what kind of measures and checks have been put in place to ensure that the right products for different insurance products are being used? Who checks that this, the way the contract is designed and the way the other observation data is being used is actually right? And so that's where Quick comes in, because it goes beyond saying that, this contract passes or it does not pass, to really checking the insurance product to understand exactly how they have structured the product, whether they're using the kind of the right kind of other observation data or remote sensing data for that specific product and for their target market, and within the dynamics in which the insurance project is being implemented. And not just saying, yes, it passes or it fails, but also going ahead to provide a level of diagnostics or like a fallback plan. You see, it's not enough to just say that this insurance is good or this is not bad, but this chance, these are the chance to create a way for insurance companies to even check, do some diagnostics and see whether the design is actually working for them and for their stakeholders. And so this just goes beyond strengthening the capacity of farmers and governments that are subsidizing insurance to really also informing regulations in terms of insurance products, and also strengthening the quality of insurance products. In our countries, and it's the case everywhere. If you buy a good and it does not meet your expectations, you kind of tend to have a blanket opinion about that. And so we are creating, Quick is not only evaluating these products, but also creating the confidence that should ideally promote the uptake of insurance products and shield farmers from the extremes of climate by helping them understand which products would be best for them. And going beyond looking at that standard, we have also been working together to explore the value of other observation data or models, modeling yields in improving the way that index insurance is implemented. If I take an example of the Kenyan government, it's very costly to implement an area yield insurance product. And so we can see from research that you can use other observation to model yield depending on the context using different combinations of data with a 70 to 80% accuracy. And so this reduces the need for field-based audits or field-based crop cutting exercises. And so again, exploring other methods that would really reduce the cost of implementing the insurance. And this again goes back to making sure that even the cost of a government adopting an insurance product or the overall implementation costs are actually going down. So this is again going beyond the creation of standards. And maybe to give a brief background of how the contract evaluation actually works is that it begins by accessing either an existing insurance product or a product that is still in design, because those are two viable contracts that would still require an evaluation. Is that we first look at the insurance design, we collect historical ground reference data. If it's available from the insurance company, then they can avail this data. And then we look at the insurance, we look at the income of the farmers without insurance, we look at their well-being, we look at the prices of, for example, if you're talking about livestock or the crops, if you're talking about maize. And we subject the insurance contract and the data that we get from the insurance through a modeling process. And from that, we are able to understand, we take the data through, sometimes it's through a statistical yield modeling process. And most of the time, we also do interpolation to fill in the gaps where data is not available. So creating a complete set of data, if we are looking at yields and their gap, we model the yields, we estimate the yields based on the index design, and then we calculate the payouts and look at whether the farmer is going to be better off with or without the insurance. But then that is on the evaluation side. There's also the diagnostic side. And on the diagnostic side, we are looking at what would be the alternative indices, what would be the alternative indices that would produce a better outcome and make the insurance product better. And by doing this, we are also looking at reducing the idiosyncratic risk. In Kenya, we've gone beyond supporting the government with the remote sensing side to actually supporting them in the definition of the unit areas of insurance. Because if the unit areas of insurance are not designed well, then you're introducing a lot of problems, even in the implementation of the product itself. And so we are going beyond just evaluating the contracts or providing diagnostics to providing other support that improves the way the insurance is being implemented. And again, we've talked about the value of satellite indices in improving the value of insurance. And basically, from all these different components, reducing the cost of implementing an insurance program. And the way we are doing this, or the way we are implementing QUIC, is that we have a kind of a structure. And pre-COVID, I think at that time, we held most of the discussions with the insurance companies. And we are pushing for the discussion that, is this something that is important to have? And I remember the first meeting that we had in December 2018 with insurance stakeholders from insurance companies, reinsurance, the regulatory authority in East Africa, and I think we had participation from Mozambique, looking at whether the idea of QUIC is really valuable. And there was a consensus that this is something that adds value at the IRA level, the Insurance Regulatory Authority. It's an additional measure that provides an additional test to check on the quality of the insurance products. And how we envision this would work is that the insurance companies and the other insurance design stakeholders would ideally request for certification. And this request would go through the QUIC certification board, and this would include the Insurance Regulatory Authority. And their goal would be to advertise, to request that new insurance products or even existing ones require to be certified. And then once an insurance product is submitted for certification, it's sent to the technical lab, and this is the RCMRD and the Quick team. And we already have established methodologies that have been tested against existing contracts that we are continuously improving and automating, that will then be used to evaluate an insurance contract. And then the evaluation results are sent back to the regulatory authority, which will assess these results and communicate to the insurance company. And so this is ideally how the certification process has been structured. And the team has been very intentional about inclusivity. We have made sure that we are bringing together all the necessary stakeholders, including the governments, into these discussions to make sure that they are part of the process and they understand what this means. And also so that there is a very clear understanding of the value at all levels in having this certification in place. And I would say, like in Kenya, we've had a lot of openness, for example, from the Kenyan government in terms of submitting their data for evaluation. It has gaps, but there is that willingness and understanding of the value. And also in Uganda and Mozambique, we've had that willingness of insurance stakeholders to submit their data for evaluation. And so in conclusion, I'd say that Quick provides a win-win situation, because if you look at the side of farmers, it provides them with a non-complicated mark of quality that allows them to know that this insurance, that gives them the confidence in an insurance product. It gives the government the confidence to invest in insurance products, because it knows that within the context of implementation, that these products are right. And it also gives the insurance companies some level of, security, knowing that their product does not result in unnecessary losses on their side. And as I also mentioned, that we are also doing a lot of research to look at how we can use other observation to reduce the cost of insurance. And from all this, even in the scientific community, we've had a lot of interest, and this has resulted in a new grant a month ago to the Severe Network, the RCMRD team. And the goal of this is to look at the potential benefits of having these quick standards on improving the resilience of women. So not just the value on the insurance design and implementation, but specifically focusing on the value of such a standard in improving the resilience of women farmers. And so I'd like to stop there. I hope I have not exceeded my time, and I look forward to engaging more during the breakout session. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much, Lillian, for helping us understand a complex problem, but also pointing towards a solution. So that was great. So I'm sure we're going to come back and have questions and conversations on more of these issues. But now let's turn to Paswal Marenya, who's going to then help us understand another approach to generating resilience, namely through stress-tolerant seeds, either alone or in combination. So Paswal, a senior economist with CIMMYT, thank you very much for joining us. So please take it away.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for having me to share with you very briefly some of the tentative results that we're getting from one of our projects that we just finished about 18-20 months ago. It focuses largely on using stress-tolerant maize and insurance as a bundled product to achieve resilience aims for smallholder farmers. So I'll explain that as we go on. I'm presenting this on behalf of the team that's largely based at UC Davis, as you can see there. The outline is basically, I'm going to say very briefly where the stress-tolerant work is coming from, and why we thought that bundling is a good idea, and some results that illustrate the idea of resilience or resilience plus, and that will feed into the lessons. How do you then get households to achieve resilience plus? something about farmer learning, and eventually I'll go on a slightly fishing expedition. It doesn't draw exactly from the paper or the draft paper we are working on, but a fishing expedition on the need for scaling. So for many years, CIMMYT and the CGI system have worked on stress-tolerant maize breeding for some time. In fact, drought tolerance breeding started almost in the 70s. And what you're seeing on this screen is basically a screen grab of 3 projects that have been going on at various points since 2006, DTMA, since 2015, that closed last year, STMA, DTMAS, all talking about drought tolerance, either scaling or breeding, what have you. Currently, this is a sort of a project that draws on all those projects, scaling all manner of stress-tolerant maize, again, breeding, seed company support, commercialization. And so, in summary, there has been quite a bit of work now going way back to the early 2000s, either working on insect resistance, pest resistance, drought tolerance, as I've shown you, water efficient maize, maize that is suitable for low nitrogen African soils, and what have you. So in 2015, we joined the fray in terms of this RCT that I'm going to explain. So the bundling innovative risk management technologies to accelerate agricultural growth and improve nutrition was a 3-year project that we did in Mozambique and Tanzania. But the key idea was the idea of bundling, one, the genetic, should we say, insurance of the DT maize plus an index insurance. So that hybrid product, talk about hybrids. That way we could then exploit the complementarities of either of those technologies or both technologies, reduce potentially the cost of providing the index insurance, and foster farmer learning. Now, this picture shows you something about DT maize. So what I've learned from the breeders, they say, look, the early season drought events are highly damaging for the maize crop, but very difficult to breed for. So breeders have not succeeded in that. Mid-season drought or moisture stress events also very damaging, but you can breed for them, as I've been explaining, and the projects that I was displaying shows you there are a huge amount of interest, millions of dollars that have been invested in the R&D and in seed company support and seed systems development. So the genetic protection helps you in this region over here. If something happens in the left or the right regions, then you wouldn't be able to survive, so to speak. In any case, while DT protection can go a long way, some way, it surely probably can't be the only way of enabling a smallholder household dependent on growing maize on small piece of land, living on the margins, depending on their, 700, 800, 1,500 kilograms of maize per hectare to survive, contributing to the bulk of their food security. So there is an appealing value to this concept of bundling these two approaches. So the risk mitigation in the middle and the risk transfer in the left and the right should something happen in those regions. So the design was that this was done in multiple locations in Mozambique and Tanzania. I think I won't go into all the details. Perhaps later on when people are interested, Michael will chime in as well. But the point here was basically a multi-arm treatment, RCT effort, Villages were grouped into triplets of similar villages based on socioeconomic characteristics and ecological situation. And each triplet was assigned to one of these treatments here, either a control, nothing happened here, or a DTC treatment only, where an arrangement with the seed company was made to make available to local retailers that were working with the seed companies to make available the new drought-tolerant seeds that up to that time were not available in those villages, in those markets. Or this DT seeds or drought-tolerant maize seeds were bundled or came with an insurance at a markup of 20% on the retail price on the promise that should there be an event, seed replacement would be triggered. And I'm going to show that shortly. So within each community, 20 households were followed during the life of the project. Now, so the design was basically to help create an index insurance that relied on early season rainfall deficit based on CHARPS data, or late season NDVI index as well, with villages grouped into 3 village contract zones. And something quite interesting, and I think Lillian would be interested in this, a fail-safe audit rule. If farmers felt that the promise of the insurance has not come through yet, they feel that the season was bad, they would appeal, and there would be an audit that we actually developed that would then say, okay, we'll come and check, and if it's justifiable, actually the insurance would trigger. In any case, the point is the technology, the DT technology is designed for the middle of the season. Then we complement with the index insurance to take care of the other events that would happen either in the late season, not captured by the mid-season rainfall, or very early, as I've explained. So that's just a recap of that. So the process is the insurance protected farmers' investment in the seed. So they would get back their seed part if either of the events that I've been talking about are happen. The participating seed company would be the aggregator, as the insurance companies like to call them. And so they would sell seed at 20% markup, thereby collecting the premium that would be forwarded to the insurance company. In the event of a payout, they would get the cash, and they would pass actual seed to the qualifying farmers. We worked with UAP in Tanzania, Hollard in Mozambique, 2 seed companies in Mozambique, 3 seed companies in Tanzania. So it was a huge effort, multi-sectoral effort, if you like. So to come to the some of the indicative results, so this picture basically shows the regression model with regards to the control households. Okay, so generally speaking, in Tanzania, we found that in those areas we worked in, the control households were largely about 700 kilograms per hectare, based on the yield recall that we collected during the baseline. In the event of a mid-season drought, that would fall by about 20% to about 570. They would take about 2 seasons to recover back to the 700 long-run average. But in the event of severe drought, that would basically collapse to about 50% of long-run average. And it would take another season for them to just recover part of that. They would still be more than 20% below long-run average. Now compare that in terms of the relative performance of the other households, either the green, the yield gain that the DT plus insurance households would gain, or only the DT households, the blue. We find that in a normal year, so this is the story of DT here. In a normal year, DT drought-tolerant seed gives you that advantage. It is not exactly too huge. In experimental results, it is. But the selling point of DT maize is right here. In mid-season drought, that's where you see the advantage, because you get a 40% yield difference. Had you not planted that kind of seed, you'd have lost 40% of your yield instead. Anyway, in a normal year, after mid-season drought, the advantage would come back a little bit down again, as we are saying. Within 2 years, it would be back to about 10%, more decent but modest. However, should these households be struck with a severe yield loss, then this is what happens. The trajectory then that we see is that the DT plus insurance households would recover quite remarkably, in the sense that their yields would be 200% of normal or of the control. The ones, the DT households would be 40% above the control. Now, this is where the resilience plus story begins to come, because the change in hybrid use that we observed was that among the DT plus insurance, in fact, because of the payouts, so I haven't explained this, but twice during midline and during endline, a number of households actually did get seed replacements, because unfortunately there was a drought in 2015-16 season, and therefore towards the 17-18 season we managed to replace in Tanzania more than 1,000 packets of seed. So what you see here is basically an indication of crowding in among the households with DT and insurance, in the sense that they don't simply go back to where they were, but the replacement seeds, it seems, helps them to even plant more, perhaps explaining the 200% yield advantage. So that crowding in is evidence of the resilience plus that Michael has been mentioning in this talk. So this is just part of it. I think there is a paper we're working on, and that should become available either as a working paper or a full paper, not in the too distant future. But this is the basic kind of story I wanted to share with the group.
Okay.
Now, so there are two lessons, well, maybe more than that, but the first lesson is on scaling. So we have managed to show through this prototyping that this can work. But if it can work, it needs scaling at some point. As Lillian was mentioning, the regulatory and insurance authorities have now gained quite a bit of acceptance of this product. So that's a good entry point, but it does require farmer education. We did put a lot of effort in explaining to farmers what we were up to. Very intensive sessions or community meetings had to happen for farmers to understand the experiment that we were doing. And now, so if you think about that in real life, it would involve a great deal of education as well, right? The other one is basically bringing a lot of people together and creating a value proposition to everybody, whether it's seed companies or the farmers themselves or the government, either in development impact proposition or what have you. But above all, developing the capacity in this area of work. So in conclusion, I think we have demonstrated that it is possible to generate crowding in. If insurance exists, even under difficult circumstances, you can crowd in greater input use. People can recover, people can resist adversity, and they can do, there's a chance they can even do better if they have these kinds of tools. However, the delivery of these things will require quite a bit of thinking, quite a bit of bringing multi-sectoral players on board. And number three, which I didn't explain very well, is the fact that what we are seeing, or what we were seeing, is the drought that hit in 2015-16 provided farmers to learn about this product. And they saw that, yeah, this is good. So we can rely on this. So that learning aspect can be mainstreamed either in programming, in policy, or market development. I don't have the answers how to do that, but it does point to the idea that there is the opportunity to get results like these, rigorous results like these, the ones Chris was talking about and others, and think carefully how to, make them come alive in programs, in policies, and in private sector market development. So I thank you so much. I think there's a project document at the MRR website. You can have a look at it. If you search Mozambique, Tanzania, I think it should be able to come up.
Okay, Paswal, thank you very much. That was great as well. So very much appreciated. So we're going a little bit longer than anticipated, but hopefully everybody is enjoying this this very, very rich set of discussions we've had. So our final scheduled speaker here is Mercy Kamau from Edgerton University, part of the Tegemeo Institute. So Mercy's going to talk to us about some work she's just launching on investment in weather information services and different ways of passing that information along to farmers. So Mercy, thank you very much for joining us. So please take it away.
Thank you, Michael, and everyone for this opportunity. So I'm sorry, I'll have to talk without my camera on. I think this is better because of so that we can save on bandwidth. So so as Michael has indicated, we are launching a new study on weather information, impacts on weather information. And so for this presentation, I thought maybe we could just look back and see why this became necessary. So today we are answering the question why, whether this investment in weather information would be the game changer for smallholder farmer adaptation to weather variability and climate change. So we all may know that most of agricultural production in Kenya is rain-fed, meaning that literally, the food and agriculture sector is weather-driven. And as you can imagine, that subjects farmers to threats in production and vulnerability for their livelihoods. So Kenya has adopted climate smart agriculture to address the challenge of transforming the agricultural production system and food chains so that they can sustainably increase agricultural productivity and incomes and support adaptation of vulnerable agricultural communities. And so there are several adaptation strategies that have been promoted over the years with increased emphasis, under these climate smart approaches. And some of them are on-farm strategies, which include some of what has been talked about here, use of modern inputs for improved crop or livestock productivity. And then there are others which, other management practices and other technologies that reduce the exposure to risk. Others are off-farm strategies, which include the insurance that has been talked about here, market access, market information, storage, preservation, and safety net programs. So I like this chart because it just shows us the magnitude of losses and the frequency of the losses that various specific crops in Kenya are, because of the adverse weather events that occur, which seems to be increasing over time. This particular chart, I think originally developed by FAO, but just picked from the World Bank document. Between 1980 and 2012, Kenya experienced, up to 13, that's a period of 31 years, 13 events of adverse weather and losses in GDP as a result of that. And you can see the magnitude of the losses and the frequency rates of up to 40–45%, with maize and other important crops like potatoes, beans, wheat facing quite severe losses as a result of adverse weather events. Now, so when you look at the strategies, so there's been a lot of promotion of adaptation strategies. As I said, these are mainly on the farm. Of course, there are some which are off farm, but I'd like to speak about on farm adaptation strategies. And we were looking at the information on adoption of what is commonly called under the climate smart jargon teams, technologies, innovations, and management practices. Information as at 2020 for selected counties and value chains. And we find that the adoption is quite low. When you look at the dairy value chain, this is the best performing, and just 34% of course are practicing AI. You can see good numbers compared to the others. 30% targeted selection and crossbreeding, and low adoption in others. But when we come to others like the sheep value chain, most of the herd is 71% local. The goats 97% is local, and very low uptake of other teams, especially the management and practices, but also other innovations that have been introduced into the value chain. You can see similarly just the beef value chain, there's very low adoption. When I say very low adoption, we're talking about single digits on the lower side. Similarly for indigenous chicken, which is a value chain that is commonly that is very popular with the low income and also the women and such households. The beekeeping also, you can see just 55%, 54% still using traditional beehives, but extremely low. We had a whole list of teams, and there's very little, there's a very low adoption of the teams, and which suggests that households are still not well placed and not well placed to avert the losses or to overcome the risks that come with the climate change. And you can also see even in soil and water management, irrigation and drainage, the adoption is low. Some of these numbers that you can see, like roof catchment, 20% terraces, those are the higher side, but there's a whole list of other management practices, and there's very little adoption. So that is the background to the innovation and intervention to provide weather information. And the idea is that lack of information to aid in decision making is an important barrier to adoption of improved technologies. Yeah. So the theory of change is that there's going to be behavioral change amongst the farmers as a result of exposure and use of market intelligence. So farmers are expected to take action based on weather realities. So they will, once they have information in their hands, they will adopt technologies, innovations, and management practices that reduce the impact of climate risk in bad years, and also be able in a position to capitalize on opportunities in good years. Well, there are several constraints to farmers' access to the relevant information for decision making. One of them, of course, we know is the correctness, the correct information and relevant information. If they do not have this, then the issues of trust creep in, and that has been one of the major barriers. And then also the scale. The scale, of course, is still related to the correctness and the relevance of the information that is being provided. And then also the delivery channels. As we say, this information has been there, but the delivery channels do act as barriers to this information. So the intervention is digital agro advisories that are being delivered to farmers. So agro advisories delivered to farmers using digital means. The intervention, as we understand, is this is by the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization. And we from the Tegemeo side, our interest is to assess the impacts of this kind of intervention. So KALRO wishes to stimulate farmers' utilization of the already available agronomic information. As I have said, these are on-farm strategies that are aimed at helping farmers adapt to climate variability and change. So there's already a lot of information available. And so these digital agro advisories are intended to stimulate farmers' utilization of this information and the available agronomic information. Yeah. So they've already been doing this on a pilot basis. They're providing short text messages, and these are accessible using feature phones. Yeah. So and you know the penetration rate for feature phones is on top of the roof. It's up there. So nearly every household owns a feature phone. And then in addition to the short text messages, there's a feedback loop in form of a call center. And the idea originally is to have an interactive voice response. But I think that is still in the making. So right now what they have is a call center, and when there are no people, the agents are not there manning the center, they have this IVR which responds to farmers' queries if they call at night, but also records the queries so that they are attended to the next day. So this information is value chain specific. So of course, this is a very short text message that is sent to beneficiary farmers, and it is being sent during different stages within the season. Depending on the weather realities, the information will be tailored to what the farmer, to guide farmers' actions, and it is value chain specific. So currently they're covering 30 value chains across the country, and these are the priority value chains for two large public projects actually that are covering the whole project, the whole country. We have the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, and we have the National Agriculture and Rural Inclusive Growth Project. These are two public projects, and the beneficiaries are benefiting from this information. So currently, KALRO is, this initiative is relying on weather information from the Kenya Met department. The Kenya Met has 39 manual stations, 109, 39 automated weather stations. It also has virtual stations. And they also send weekly, monthly, and seasonal weather information, forecasts from KMD. And KALRO has been using this information to craft the advisories, the agro advisories that farmers have been receiving. So in addition to what KALRO has been undertaking, the information from the Kenya Met Department, there's a US-based company, Aware Solution, providing weather intelligence for changing or variable weather climate. So they have various weather intelligence related interventions. And so this company is providing information that will be used by KALRO. So what has happened is that Aware has signed an agreement with the government of Kenya to provide weather intelligence solutions. Yeah. And in this partnership, there'll be, accurate weather data and analytical tools available for generating actionable insights. So the value added by Aware here is access. Carol will be able to access Aware's several thousand virtual weather stations in Kenya, and over the next 2 years, and then also access advanced weather data and analytics to support the climate smart agricultural decisions. The Aware's virtual stations are also, of course, going to be complemented by Kenya Met Department automated ground weather stations. And as I said, there are that number. And of course, the project is also supporting an additional 120 weather stations that are going to be at the sub-county level and are expected to provide much, much more accurate data for the farmers in combination with the virtual weather stations. Information from their virtual weather stations. So these efforts will ensure farmers have access to, not only the latest information, but most accurate information about the rainfall and other weather parameters that they need to know. What is not clear yet to me is whether the farmers will be receiving the information. So the study that we are undertaking is on the impact of digital agro-weather advisories on productivity and resilience in farming and pastoral communities in Kenya. It is in partnership, of course, with the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project and the CARO and the Met Department. And so what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at, first of all, we'll be looking at the suitability, the relevance and suitability of some of the teams that are being promoted based on the weather realities. And whether they are, the relevance and suitability based on mitigating the impacts of climate and weather variability. We'll also be assessing farmers' access.
Let's see, I think we may have lost Mercy. Is anyone able to hear her? So sorry we lost Mercy. She was just, I think, at her final slide to kind of filling in where she's trying to go with some of these open questions about whether the provision of this information would be valuable. We did want to pause for just a moment and give Chris Barrett a moment to reflect on sort of bundling innovations. And we've looked at a number of different devices. So Chris, you want to jump in quickly and just, we are a bit behind, as Ermia said, so if you can be succinct, which I know you're good at, so please take it away.
Yeah, so I just prepared a couple of slides, not having seen the other presentations, but I think this fits quite nicely. I'm going to be building expressly off of a report that was issued in December in 2020. The journal Nature Sustainability convened its annual global expert panel. I was the lead co-chair, and it was around innovations in agri-food systems. And the key takeaway from that report, as reflected in its title, you see here the image of the report cover. It's coming out as a book from Palgrave Macmillan later this year. Socio-technical innovation bundles for agri-food systems innovation. The key takeaway was the bundling innovations is going to be absolutely essential to agri-food systems transformation. And we've heard that in spades in these presentations, most explicitly in Paswell's about bundling insurance with drought tolerance. And I just want to very quickly explain the general reasons for this. The first is scientific research and development is obviously crucial, but a ton of it happens. The returns to it are still high. We still underinvest, but there is a massive pipeline of very promising natural and social science advances at various stages of deployment readiness. In our report, we enumerate in some detail 97 of these, and many of those are already at aggregate scales. And these span geographies, they span value chains. We are not short on new technologies that are coming through the pipeline from farm level through processing level down to consumption, consumer level, and food service, et cetera. So throughout the value chain, there's tons of innovation happening. Everything from digital to genomic to engineering to social science, policy-based innovation. So the first limiting feature really isn't the science right now in most cases. There are exceptions to that rule. Really, the key is coming up with the right bundles for a given context. And there are three key reasons to bundle, and we've heard about several of them, but there's at least one other one to pay attention to. The one we've already heard about is that there are synergies with bundling. We saw this in the Green Revolution, the first image there coming from Erie, and Pazwell described this very nicely, that there's both risk-based limitations on farmer uptake of improved genetic material, as well as the need for the improved genetic material itself. The work on drought-tolerant maize exemplifies this, as does the flood or submergence-tolerant rice work that Kyle and others have done in South Asia. Here you're best suited to bundle different innovations that each relax constraints that farmers face. If you relax just one constraint, there's a second limiting constraint that binds very soon thereafter. So the story of the Green Revolution is only partly a story of better genetic material in staple crops. It's equally a story of coupling improved genetic material with extension services to convey information, like Mercy was talking about, with quality control screening about germplasm through research stations, a variety of variation on Lillian's theme of importance of quality control and information and building trust, management of irrigation, you name it. There were a lot of synergies here. So it was bundling of innovations that really rested behind the successes of the Green Revolution and many successes that we continue to see. But a second often overlooked reason is the political economy of spillovers. So there's a nice paper out earlier this year in Lancet Planetary Health led by Mario Ferrero, documenting how any innovations in agri-food systems that we could identify in this host of 97, every single one of them had spillovers on other SDGs that were not being targeted by the innovation. So if you were targeting trying to improve to reduce hunger, to try to improve food security outcomes, you were going to impact water, or you were going to impact gender, or you were going to impact energy. And those spillover effects on other SDGs requires attending to those, which commonly requires bundling some other innovation to attend to unintended consequences. And because unintended consequences are not unanticipated, you commonly hit lots of political obstruction of technological advance. If you don't think about bundling, those who stand to lose will stand in the way of technological advances. They will preclude governments appropriating funds to promote extension of a new innovation if they think that will hurt this incumbent group, and incumbents typically hold power. So I use this graphic where you see wind power and solar power on farmers' lands in the US Midwest as an example of this. Part of the accommodation in the US Midwest to some introduction of some new innovations, such as plant-based meat substitutes, have been to help subsidize farmers using lands for other things. So those are examples of bundling. Permitting the labeling of plant-based meat substitutes as meats comes bundled with helping to finance farmers converting to a different use of their lands other than just row crop production of feed grains for livestock production, where those livestock producers directly compete with the plant-based substitutes like Beyond or Impossible. So the political economy of spillovers and creative destruction of incumbent industries compels bundling. And finally, heterogeneous populations need different interventions. And the classic examples of this are in addressing micronutrient deficiencies, where there's a well-known approach in public health and nutrition that we need clinical supplementation, for example, of vitamin A for young children, combined with commercial fortification of products that are consumed widely by some commonly vitamin A deficient populations, like basic flours or vegetable oils that are readily and effectively fortified with provitamin A. And biofortification of new crops like orange fleshy sweet potatoes to enhance the availability of provitamin A carotenoids that can help. and encouraging consumers to consume more diverse diets. These each are effective in helping to reduce vitamin A deficiency, as just one example, but they're targeting slightly different populations. They often complement each other, even for the same population. So for each of these three reasons, because there are multiple constraints that bind in the settings we care about, since you need these synergies, because there's commonly some political economy that will obstruct the progress of promising new technologies. If they're promising, they're going to threaten somebody. So you need to bundle to be able to come up with a coalition to support the emergence of new innovations. And finally, you need heterogeneous interventions, commonly for heterogeneous populations. And finally, bundling invites the sort of co-creation that's been described in many of these different projects. This is just a clip from a core graphic in that report. You know, people come together to figure out what's the package that is politically feasible as well as technologically appropriate for a given context. And in that, they tend to refine and improve the designs and the right bundling. We certainly have seen that in the case of IBLI, of index-based livestock insurance in East Africa. So I just wanted to emphasize one of the key takeaways, I think, from all of these talks really was how central bundling of innovations is to achieving impact and to scaling these successes. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Chris. So Ermias, how we have gone rather severely over the allotted hour, but how would you like us best to proceed here in terms of further discussion?
That's okay. I think basically what is, if anybody has questions, I think now the question and answer session is open, and then we can do that way.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we have asked people to raise hand. I think there's also a reminder on the chat. So if anybody has burning questions, this is the time to ask. So I will let, if anybody has questions to do so before I jump in with mine. I mean, I found this session to be extremely interesting. I spend my days thinking about livestock production and productivity, and I can see a lot of synergies about this. And the first session we had of this independent dialogue was about Russian formulation that was supported by USDA FAS, and I can see that sort of a lot of synergy to that, and how it can be taken up. And unfortunately, Mercy's I don't think she's with us at the moment, but talking about what are the technologies that have been taken up, and so I will ask some questions, but I saw Patty raise her hand, so I will give the floor to her now.
Okay, and let me also remind everyone we have with us Kyle Emmerich, who's done some very interesting work on stress-tolerant rice varieties. So feel free to bring Kyle into the conversation. So Patty, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I know some of you, but not all of you. So I'm Patty Christensen, and I'm currently working with the World Bank, with both the agriculture and the environment groups, which has been kind of interesting juxtaposition, and it's a transformative food system challenge, as Chris has outlined so nicely. First of all, thanks very much to the presenters. I really found those very informative presentations, nice, concise summaries of some real good body of work. I had three questions, if you don't mind. One was on index-based insurance. And Chris, I was there at the beginning, and I remember very well that one of our big goals back in the day and with ILRI, and we saw it as a real gap, incidentally, that we didn't know how to work with the private sector. And at the World Bank right now, we're still grappling with that in the transformative food system world. So it's still a gap. And basically, one of the things IBLI aimed at was to stimulate change in the actions of the private sector to better meet the needs of vulnerable people. So my question is, have we seen a major shift in their behavior, and can we try to capture that, how it happened, what it is? And the reason I'm asking that is because I think there might be some very good lessons for ongoing efforts to work more closely with private sector on standards, certifications, you know, all the deforestation free pledges now and sustainability commitments that private sector food companies are making. You know, can we draw some lessons from both the crop and the livestock insurance lessons about how do we create those partnerships and work? Because the private sector, it, you know, just comes from such a different angle and has different incentives. And I think we just know more about working with the government sector. So that was my first. Second was on the bundling innovations. And I love the HERS, by the way, healthy, equitable, resilient, sustainable. A wonderful acronym. Because really the bundling of innovations has to include targeted actions and investments to reach women, to reach youth, to reach marginalized peoples, if you will. And Lillian, I was glad to hear that, you know, you're looking now at this impact on women farmers. But Chris, you said financial innovation requires others still to be determined, and women's empowerment was right up there. So we still have a long way to go there, obviously. Is there a danger that the technology-centric approaches of insurance, of weather forecasts, of digital approaches actually excludes these groups instead? And I guess we would all say, yes, we know there, and we've got evidence and studies that this can be exclusionary also. So I guess the real question is, what have we learned about steps to avoid that happening? And why is it 11 years later that we're finally looking at the woman's angle, for example? You know, I guess I know some of the answers. It's not easy, but anyway. And my third question, does this bring us a little bit to another gap that I've seen for many years, but I think is still relevant, is the role of innovative communication efforts. So for example, Chris, you said financial innovation requires education. So you're probably lumping communication efforts within education, but I think we need to tease that out a bit. Mercy, you talked about access to weather information, but it's whose access and how are they getting the access, okay? And Pasquale, you talked about farmer learning. And again, communication is just so key there. And if you think about innovative things like Shamba Shape Up in Kenya, to me, that's just still an undertold story of how many farmers are being reached and how many are changing their behavior from watching a soap opera and an infotainment show. And how do we get governments, you know, really jumping on that bandwagon? So I'll stop there, but thank you. That was really nice presentations. I enjoyed that.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Patty. So those are three great questions. Why don't I try to pass them off? So maybe on her first question about, to the extent some of these innovations really help us learn how to work with the private sector, or get the private sector interested in working with vulnerable and less wealthy populations. So Chris, maybe you would like to say a bit about that, and then Kyle and perhaps Pasquale would also like to sort of mention what they've seen around specifically around seed companies, seed technologies, and how the private sector has gotten involved in that. But Chris, why don't we start with you and then go to Kyle and then to Pasquale?
Sure. So thanks, Patty, for three great questions, and I'm glad I'm only assigned one of them to tackle right. I think there are two key things that we need to recognize about engaging the private sector. And keep in mind, I sit in a business school at Cornell, so you know I'm constantly being reminded of these things in my interactions with my colleagues and the various corporate types and startup types who come through the Dyson School. The first thing to keep in mind is that they do have financial profitability targets. They're not exclusively driven by profits, although publicly traded firms are held to those standards a little more strictly by investors than privately held firms are. But things have to be profitable. Businesses are not going to make charitable contributions in their product and services offerings. They might make charitable contributions, but they'll call it that. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Let's not be unrealistic about what we can expect from the private sector. But the second thing is an awful lot of businesses increasingly recognize that there are markets in low-income populations and that those can be profitable markets if they can develop good quality services or good quality products, there is money to be made. Indeed, I mentioned one of the great early operational champions of Italy was TIA, was Tocqueville Insurance Agency, a private company that saw this as a really important source for attracting clients who would, different form of bundling, look for their other services as well. And by becoming clients for their insurance as well as their savings and other products, they would help to make the operation that much more financially viable. This requires looking for companies that see those markets. And oftentimes that is when they are presently competing in saturated, highly competitive kind of mid-market. You know, the insurance companies in Kenya are engaged in cutthroat competition around life, property, and casualty, and auto insurance in urban areas. There's just not much space for expanding their markets and their returns right now. So the ones that are more progressive and think that they can see a way to make money off of rural offerings are doing that. And that's, I see that reflected in the operations of many companies in many different spheres around the world in agri-food systems more broadly. So I think as long as we keep in mind, they have to be able to show that they are making decent financial returns for their investors, helping these companies to see how they can design products and services that will make them money and solve problems. People will pay to have their problems solved, even poor people.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Kyle, I don't know if coming out of your experience with flood-tolerant rice varieties, did you have any kind of reflections on how the private sector fit in or didn't fit in very easily in terms of that technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. I had actually written down in my notebook when Chris was talking about bundling innovations that scaling is another reason why we might want to think about bundling innovations, trying to think about alternative ways to scale these types of technologies. And I've actually, in recent work, started to think about trying to push new innovations, the flood-tolerant rice stuff that you mentioned earlier, through private agro dealers rather than through the sort of standard government agricultural extension channel, with the idea that those private agro dealers face very different incentives. And so I think there is a tremendous role for this sector in situations where their incentives are well aligned. These are, I'm talking about very local agro dealers who are sort of on the last mile and who are selling seeds to farmers. Sort of getting these people engaged in the diffusion process, and we found in the RCT that doing that can actually lead to superior adoption compared to sort of doing more of the business as usual government sector public agricultural extension. And so I think there's a huge role for finding those type of situations, again, where the incentives are well aligned. And so I think we've got good evidence from that RCT, and I hope to see more of this sort of working with these private local agro dealers at this level.
Great, thanks, Kyle. And Paswell, any reflections on the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, exactly. We've been doing. So one of the things, one of the feedbacks I was asked in the project to hold conversations, end of project conversations with the seed companies actually. And one of the things they said is that they really liked the idea. They really liked this idea that you can actually give farmers confidence. So to them, in their thinking, if you give farmers confidence in a packet of seed, what that did to their business is that it gave them that edge to capture market share, if you like. So it was a way of perhaps signaling to the marketplace, hey, look, I have a great product, I'm willing to stand behind it. So to answer the question real quickly is, if you're working with the private sector, think very quickly how what you're doing will, one, give them that market edge or allow them to enter into new markets. One of the seed companies was very happy that in the district we had chosen to go to is one area he actually hadn't thought of going to. But because we started with the community meetings, seed parks, and what have you in the initial year, that market just expanded for him. And so he was very, very happy about that. So the point is, give them that business proposition. Find a way that the private sector collaborator will see, hey, if I participate in this, this becomes a reality, it gives me that market reputation. Number two was they were talking about data and data innovation. So the private sector, you'll be surprised, there are a lot of them who are really hungry for data. So if you have a system that can generate really useful data for them and give them guidance on future markets or how to improve their businesses, that will also be a winner in that collaboration.
Yeah. Okay, and just to sort of add to that, in the same project that Paswell described, one of the seed companies we worked with in Mozambique on this project was completely thrilled. So the results Paswell shared with us, basically what we were seeing as the farmers' initial adoption was actually quite tentative. So the results Paswell was presenting, which by the way, for those of us that are statistical wonks, they were all statistically significant, but those were intention to treat effects. And there was a huge headspace that even the adopters had to intensify. And what we actually saw is that once the technologies proved their worth, they actually doubled the intensity with which they were using the technology. And the seed companies very quickly caught on that insurance was a great idea because it gave them a market, and a market that in fact had some dynamics in it. And so actually our primary seed partner in Mozambique is actually continuing this program now continuing with the same insurance company. And they very much picked up on the synergies that they had, that there is a business case between seed sales and the insurance, and they see it as a really interesting thing. So let's go to Patty's second question. She was asking us, as you offer various kinds of innovations, are you at the risk of excluding people? And since I'm talking, let me just say a word, and then Lillian, perhaps you'd like to come in and tell us a bit more about your new work. But Patty, with a former postdoc, Eleanor Banami, we just published a paper in Applied Economic Perspectives and Policy, where we sort of go through the major rural financial market innovations and talk about why each of them actually is very prone to precisely the kind of exclusionary pattern that you're working at. So to give a concrete example, a lot of people get very excited about digital credit scoring, different kind of algorithms. But what people haven't really, and they say, oh, this must be inclusive of all sorts of people. But if you actually look at how the algorithms work, they have a way to self-perpetuate advantage, right? So I can become digitally credit scored as credit worthy if I communicate a lot with Ermias, and everybody knows Ermias is a dean and a big guy, and Chris is a dean and a big guy. So if I'm connected through networks that can be picked up remotely from communication, and I'm connected to the big people, then I become credit worthy. But the question is, it's not really getting beyond the existing set of social relationships. And so unless you think about it harder, it's not necessarily transformative. It just perpetuates initial disadvantage. So that paper with Eleanor, which I think is actually out now in print, but we sort of think through insurance credit, digital savings kinds of mechanisms, and to what extent are they likely to do that. Specifically in the case of insurance, we're actually just launching a version of the IBLI product, which is meant to speak specifically to the risks that women's face. So one of the things we've discovered, there's a very tight gender division of labor, as you know, Patty, in that northern part of Kenya, and particularly mobile herding and larger stock animals is very much seen to be the domain of men. And yet that's the element that's indexable, right? So as Chris talked about, IBLI catches the IBLI is able to get to the forage availability. But we spoke to women, and initially women, we actually had experimental game. Women weren't very interested in insurance for men's activities. But then we sort of, using skits and a few other simple devices, women are very cognizant once you talk to them about their indirect exposure to risk, or what we've started talking about, intra-household risk shifting. right? So they really do bear that rangeland risk, but just in an indirect kind of way. So we're actually launching a version of IBLI, working with Tocqueville Insurance Africa that Chris mentioned, where we're actually doing a variant where the unit of measure is different, and it's meant to be targeted either at women's business assets and business activities, and or simply their family responsibility, making clear it's rangeland risk that's being insured, but also sort of sending, you know, the communication is about women's indirect exposure to those risks. So I think we, you know, when it comes to index insurance, as Lillian really stressed, what can you index is one kind of question, but then when you land in the middle of a gender division of labor, you may inadvertently create a product that is sort of gender biased. And so hence we've been trying to push forward and find a way to sort of do that responsibly. So we'll see how that worked out. By the way, it worked out great in experimental games. We sort of doubled women's insurance demand when we simply changed the way we were talking about it, and the units of denomination of the insurance were no longer per tropical livestock unit, but per family unit. So anyway, Lillian, would you like to jump in and any thinking you all have been doing on your new work, or more generally on women and insurance demand?
Yeah, I think it's actually a broader issue beyond just insurance, but really even in any technology product design, the fact that we might not have been very sensitive in looking at the gender impacts. And so I think that is changing, and that is why we have this research coming up that is going to look at what, you know, a certification means in terms of improving not just the livelihoods of a family as a unit, but in increasing the resilience of women, especially in agriculture. And it might take a slightly, you know, divergent focus on the crop plants, because, you know, despite the fact that we have a lot of the land ownership being under men, then the major of the agricultural activities are done by women. So trying to understand what improving the availability of insurance and the value of insurance actually means for the livelihoods of women who are in agriculture. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And why don't we use this as a segue into Patty's third question? And I think Mercy's been able to rejoin us. So Mercy, you know, first of all, Patty's third question was actually on innovation communication, but as you think about the new work you're launching, and how are you all considering whether the messaging and the communication that you're doing gets out, and specifically gets out to women? Is that something that you're wrestling with? So Mercy, can you join us? I see her connected, but microphone.
I am connected.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Mercy. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you. So the work that we're doing is you know, the government has interventions, and we've come in as a research institute to look at the impacts of that, and the accessibility of the technology to various groups that are being targeted by that program or that project. And so, Patty, what we have in mind is that there's differential access, and there's differential utilization of the technology. And of course, the impacts are different given the different circumstances that the farmers, including women, find themselves in. So we are looking into those aspects as the extent to which women are benefiting from this large public program. And the idea is to inform the government and the implementing agencies the extent to which they're reaching farmers in different value chains, but especially women who within their documents really speak about the importance of reaching women and other marginalized groups. So we are already collecting that disaggregated information, and we hope to inform the project on the extent to which that digitalization and agro-weather information has reached the women, and the extent to which women and other farmers are using that information and how they're going to be using that. So we hope to generate that kind of information, and we think this will be very, very helpful. Of course, we have challenges. These are public projects. So the implementation, the contracts that the implementers sign with the funding agencies has KPIs, and of course, so just like the private sector, even in publicly funded programs, you find you have challenges with the extent to which you can incorporate, like social experiments or some behavioral science kind of experiments to bundle together with that information to see what works best and what does not work best. Chris? Michael?
Yes, okay, thank you. Well, we're close to being out of time. And Ermias, if we had another moment or two, and you tell us, Patty's question was kind of a communication, but I think an overarching challenge that I think we should mention, and I know Kyle has experience with this, and Paswell alluded to this, and I know Chris has experience with this, which is how do you learn about stochastic technologies, meaning technologies that only periodically pay off? And, Kyle, in your paper on flood tolerant rice, like footnote 6 or something, says, oh, the people that didn't see the technology and adoption disadopted. And we see the same thing in our study. And so it's communication, but it's also experiential learning somehow seems important. But Ermias, I think we're probably out of time. Is that correct? And you need to close us up.
Yes. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I would have liked to continue for another hour or two. I mean, the discussion is great and the presentation was absolutely fantastic. But yes, unfortunately, we have to close. So I.
Who would have thought economists talk so much?
Well, I think you've proven that not only just talk, but also give us really, really great information. And as I said, I have a lot of questions, but maybe I'll reach out independently. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody, the panelists and the participants. I think this has been a really fantastic session. And I would really, really like to thank Michael for his willingness and excitement once we approached him and tried to work with him on this issue. He was ready to go, right from the start. So I really, really appreciate all this work, and a lot of this work that has been happening through the U.S. government funding with host countries. I think this is really what we want to highlight in this independent dialogue. So I think there's a lot of room, there's a lot of place to go. I would like to see that African map that Chris showed to be completely green, so that everybody sort of adopted all this thing, and all the items that Mercy has shown us to be adopted as well, and everything that Pascal shown us in terms of bundling, we can all do that. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the future as well. So hopefully this work will continue. So the discussion will be summarized and submitted to the Food Systems Summit in the next couple of weeks. And in the next few days, hopefully we'll be able to send you a draft of this report for your review. And hopefully will you get back to us within a week's time so that we can include it in the final draft. The recording of today's dialogue will be available in a few weeks on the UC Davis World Food Center website. So thank you again for spending your time and sharing your knowledge with us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.